Hello, everybody. This is David Beery, candidate for United States Senate. So tonight I come before you, you know, as we talk about different items and different things in society, I think it's important to kind of take current events and, obviously kind of stop every now and then and kind of talk about current events, not necessarily just things that we're talking about to improve in the future, but things that are relevant to now, right? Because as we all know, there's a new Congress in, and there's a lot of folks that are kind of either to the left or to the right. We got some in the middle, but they're really taking under a lot of consideration some things that can really impact us on a high level. I think one of the bigger things, over the last year, we've been talking a lot about the pandemic and are we going to force people to take shots? Is that constitutional? Churches have closed. First Amendment rights have been attacked. You know, and I think the big piece now, and you're going to find a lot of people of opportunity, opportunistic people that are going to try to really kind of paint a picture of recent events, albeit tragic, that becomes the poster child for an entire movement. And let me be the first to say, this is by far completely and it's just unacceptable. I mean, anytime that anything happens that impacts lives of Americans and innocent lives are lost, you know, it's just beyond words. And I think, for me, being a pastor, we look at and we treat all in the eyes of God. So what I mean by that is regardless of race, religion, creed, sexual orientation, whatever, I don't care. We're all Americans. We're all in this ship together, and we can either sink or swim. Kentucky's got a great motto on their flag, which is "United we stand, divided we fall." And I really apply that motto kind of, to the entire country. Either we stand united as Americans, or we're going to divide and we're going to fail. If you look at every great civilization and every great culture, one of the big divisive factors has been, if you look, I guess the easiest way to kind of put it is, there's a faction that doesn't necessarily agree with the other side, but and that's okay. It's okay to have good debates. It's okay to have good rhetoric every now and then. I mean, it keeps things alive, it keeps things interesting, and more importantly, it gets all the facts out, right? So, if there are some people that are undecided or whatnot, they're able to kind of take that in and absorb it and then make their mind up. It's kind of like a jury. A jury will take all the facts in from the prosecution and from the defense. And, a lot of times what you'll find is, if you watch some of the court TV shows, whatever, you kind of get compelled to one side versus the other, or you have your mind kind of made up going into the situation prior to hearing all of the facts. And, I think that's where I'm kind of heading with this. So when we look at recent events, mass shootings are by far absolutely positively not good. They are unacceptable. And we look at the polarizing effects of it. What does that really do to America? What does it do to the cities? What does it do to establishments? And I think that a couple of facts that I'll kind of put out tonight, and obviously some more about gun deaths and things like that, but I think the overarching message I really want to kind of highlight tonight is that, punishment for all is not the solution. And you'll see a lot of members in Congress. You're going to see a lot of people come out in the coming days, and even in the past couple of days, you're going to see a lot of people that, punishment for all. Joe Biden's, he's threatening, gun legislation through executive order, which is by far not good, right? I mean, you have one person regulating and determining what the Constitution means and overriding the Constitution, right? I mean, the Second Amendment is what it is. The Second Amendment is our right to own and bear arms. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, but if you just focus on that one key phrase, it's the right to bear arms, and that right shall not be infringed. And that's where we run into a lot of challenges today, because a lot of people don't want to follow the Constitution. They want to rewrite the Constitution. It's kind of like the Bible. They want to take it for what it is, or they want to change the words up to whatever they want it to be. But at the end of the day, that's not up to them. The Constitution was written, and it was, this great experiment, and they really wanted us to be able to, just flourish as a society, and they knew that we would grow bigger, we would get stronger, and but the one thing that doesn't change is the Constitution. Yes, over time we've added amendments and things like that, but if you look at the cornerstone of the Constitution, and if you just think about it from a number standpoint, number one and number two, are coexistent. One cannot exist without the other. That is a right to free speech. Now, that is correct when you say that, hey, David, it's the government's infringement on free speech. You're right, but it's also the freedom of religion, right? So the government's never going to come in and tell us about religion. But over the last year, we haven't seen that. The government has told us about religion. The government's told us that we can't go to church. The government has told us a lot of things that in my 40 years on Earth, I never thought that I would ever see. It almost feels like we're in another country. And I don't want to say communist or a socialist, but it really feels like that. It feels like, as Americans, every day at every turn, our rights are being trampled on. Now we look at the Second Amendment. They are, and I'll just call it for what it is, they're gun grabbers. They've been talking about this for the last year and a half, 2 years, about what their agenda was. And they never hid that. And what really is dumbfounding to me is, there are a lot of people in America that have guns, and I think the bigger part of it is it's, not for the purpose of, going out and doing the atrocities that are happening here. It could be for protection, it could be for sport, it could be collecting. I mean, there's a million reasons why people buy stuff and own stuff, right? I think if you ask 10 different people why they have guns, you're going to come up with some common themes, but you may get some oddities out there. I like to collect guns. I like the way they look. I like to shoot guns. It's fun. It's a way for me to bond with my children or my dad or my friends, whatever. But I think the biggest piece, at least for me, it's about protection. You know, I think if I dialed 911 right now, it would probably take 10 to 15 minutes for the cops to get here. And I live in a nice area. I live in a subdivision, in a nice part of northern Kentucky. And, I can only imagine what that would look like, in a rural setting or in a bad neighborhood setting, or, even if you get into that urban setting, I mean, the response times are pretty high. And another thing you have to think about too is that police aren't there to be proactive, there to be a reactive force, right? Sometimes they can kind of prevent things or whatnot, but at the end of the day, most of the time they're showing up after what has happened, right? If we look at the last couple of days, same thing, right? You're looking at what has happened. So a couple of things to kind of think about. So as we look at all these different bills in the state of Kentucky, and as we look at all of these, if you look at, hey, Michael, thank you, man. If you're looking at all of even the federal, we've got a couple of different House bills that Nancy Pelosi is really trying to push through, and she is just really pushing. And guns are bad. Well, why do you have armed guards? If guns are bad, why do you get special protection but we can't have that? Last time I checked, we're all Americans, regardless if you're an elected official or not. We elected you. Well, actually, I didn't elect her, but you get the gist, right? You're a public servant. So if anything, you should be setting an example, not necessarily living a life of luxury and doing whatever you want to do because you're special, because you're Nancy Pelosi and you're powerful. But at the end of the day, guns really are about protection. And if you think broad spectrum. Why do you think no country's ever really invaded America? Now, World War II, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, blah, 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 blah. But and that's no disrespect to that event, but there was never a land invasion. There was none of that, because at the end of the day, we have, pretty much the largest army in the world, even though we're not like, let's say, active duty or army reserve, but we're, we could be a militia, we could be whatever we want to be. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of resources that other countries don't have. And that's one of the things the Second Amendment protects us from, right? So that's a big thing. But I think the big piece is home protection. I've heard many stories where, and the one that comes to my mind, a lady was at home with her kids and she called her husband, and the husband was talking to her over the phone. He dialed 911, and these guys kicked in the door. She had her kids in a closet, and, he was like, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. So the lady was like, I can't do it. But when I opened the door, she literally took a 38 special and she dumped 5 or 6 rounds into this guy's, like, just face in just this area. And the guy was able to walk downstairs. He was able to get into his car and drive down the street before the cops apprehended him. Now, imagine if there would have been another one or two people in that house and they would have walked around that corner. She's out of ammo. With the wheel gun, that's real hard to reload, right? Unless you've got special reloaders or whatnot. But with a high capacity magazine with 15 or 16 rounds, you've got five for him, five for him, five for him. And the reloading is a little bit easier, right? So from a home protection standpoint, that makes sense. Even if you look in an AR-15 with a 30 round mag, right? You've got enough ammunition to stop the threat, neutralize the threat. And then if there's any other threats, then you have the opportunity to stop those as well. AR-15s are not military items. They're not weapons of war. If you ever made an AR-15 fully automatic, the barrel would probably melt after probably 200 or 300 rounds going through it. So, these are sporting rifles. Do they have a bad rap by all measures? But that kind of ties into my next point. Just because I have an AR-15 or 5 AR-15s or 10 AR-15s, the bottom line is that's for my personal use. And a big part of it is for my personal protection. But I use them for hunting. I use them for sporting. I use them for all kinds of stuff, So they're definitely there's definitely a multi-use that can be, utilized for those rifles. But I think another part of it is for me too, when they talk about gun registration, they talk about universal background checks and they talk about all this stuff, they'll spend the next year trying to figure out where they screwed up, where, the FBI knew about this person and that person knew about this person and why didn't they talk and how did they go by this. But the fact is, even with a universal background check, that wouldn't have stopped what happened, because universal background checks are literally going to just take regular citizens like you and me who like firearms and are going to either A, stop us from buying them, or B, slow us down, which, to be fair, is not fair. If we have a concealed carry license or if we've done nothing wrong in our lives, we've lived a good life, and we haven't done anything like, I don't know, domestic violence, murder, some kind of, felonious assault with a weapon, robbery, whatever, we shouldn't be flagged. We should be able to go buy what we want to buy when we want to buy. I can go buy a car. I can go to the store and buy knives. I can go to the store and buy bows and arrows. I can buy, a ton of stuff. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to it's about control, because if you have the weapons and you control the weapons, then you have no way that they can fight back against you. I mean, look at Washington, D.C. They've had troops there for, 2.5, 3 months now, 2.5 months at least. And the funny part is, if you look at that cost, you're looking at $550 million. I think it's the last that's when I heard. I mean, the Capitol's surrounded, everything's surrounded. You can't go to DC now. And it's like, there's these credible threats. There's credible threats. Well, there's always going to be threats. There's always going to be banter in chat rooms and stuff like that, because people aren't happy with what's going on. It doesn't matter if Trump's in office or Biden's in office or who's in office. You're always going to have that rhetoric. But at the end of the day, what example are we setting not only for our children but other parts of the world? People are looking at us and they're laughing and they're thinking, this is a symbol of freedom. We don't want that, and the beacon of freedom needs to burn free. They need to make sure that the Capitol is safe and the White House is safe. I'm not saying that, but do they need 5,000 troops? They need 10,000 troops. I think at one point they had 26,000 troops there. And for what? Nothing happened, because most of the time things aren't going to happen. They want to look at one day and they want to say that, the right's so bad and all this stuff. Well, what about the last year and a half? Most of these bigger cities had rioting and burning and pilfering and everything for hundreds of days. But yet, in hell, even DC had rioting and stuff like that for, I think it was July or June of last year or whatnot. The city was on fire, but that's not popular. It's not mainstream media. People don't care about that. All they care about is the narrative that they want to spin. So I think for me, I want to kind of just put out a couple of facts. So in 2016, 38,658 people who died. 22,938 were suicides. We're one of the only countries that actually, and I think we're probably the only country that actually includes suicides in that number. And out of that 38,000, you had 14,415 that were homicides, of which 71 died in mass shootings. So we talk about all these mass shootings, 253 in the last couple of years. It's a lot, right? And again, it's not something to be taken lightly. But at the end of the day, when you look at 14,415 homicides, 71 were from mass shootings, right? So again, and when you look at mass shootings, people talk about AR-15s, right? And I think it's kind of important to kind of think about that. But the types of guns that are used in U.S. murders, think about this for a second. I want you to really take this in. For all the people who are listening that hate AR-15s, 64% of the guns used in U.S. murders were handguns. Let me repeat that again. 64% of all murders committed in the United States of America were committed by handguns. The percentage of rifles, 4%. 4. Shotguns, 2. And then others, 2. They don't list what the other 2 is. And then there's another unknown of 28%. But at the end of the day, the vast majority of murders are committed by handguns. Now, if you look at the statistics of the 14,415, I think I read the statistic of like 90+% were committed by gang related activities. So if you have 14,000, so let's do some quick math. So let's just do 14,000 just to kind of round up. So you're looking at 12,600 were committed by gangbangers, by people that don't go out to, a gun store. They don't go out to, these private sales. They don't go out to, the gun shows and whatnot and buy guns. They're buying guns illegally. They're buying them on the street, which basically means that background checks are going to do what? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely, positively nothing. So one of the big things that you have to ask yourself, and one of the big things that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at these bills in the state of Kentucky, and even on the federal side, is what are they going to actually accomplish, right? So are they going to solve for these mass shootings? Are they going to solve for these 14,415 homicides at that point? What, 2,600? Are they going to stop those? No. Are they going to help the police get there faster? No. Are they going to better equip the police to resolve these issues? No. I think the bigger piece is what it's going to do is it's going to take people's rights like me and you that have the ability to defend ourselves against the 12,600 gangbang shootings and things like that, depending on where you're at, or, just in criminals in general. If people are robbing you, you can't just say, oh, take what you want, because it doesn't work that way anymore. And most of the time it has never worked that way. Most of the time there's violence that's incited against a person. So I think for me, gun violence is simply put, it's not something that we should have, but it's something that we do have. But if you could take any type of weapon, if you can take away hammers, you can take away knives, you can take away forks, you can take away, cars, buses, planes, whatever. There's always going to be a calculated risk whenever you have someone behind the wheel or a human being interacting with something, especially if it's dangerous, And I hate to say that, but it's the reality of what it is, right? Is banning all guns going to resolve anything? Well, no, of course. At that point, we look at some other countries so if you look at the United States, top 10 civilian gun owning countries, the United States, Canada is number, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You look at countries that have an international comparison of gun-related killings. So England and Wales is 3%, Canada is 38%, and Australia is 13%. So Canada's number 6, but they're like the number 2 with guns. Well, that doesn't line up, right? And then you look at England and Wales, when you look at their gun violence, well, they don't have any guns. So, but if you look at their mortality rate in relation to, just we'll say other attacks with hammers, knives, whatever, they're like 4 times the rate of the United States, right? So, and it's not to say that guns are just more accessible. If they had guns accessible there, you might see more stuff. But at the end of the day, the one size fits all does not resolve the issue. Persecuting everybody for the behavior of one doesn't resolve for everybody. They're looking at passing legislation that, by all measures, is not going to resolve anything except punish people that didn't do anything wrong. So, those are some of the things that I just kind of wanted to talk about in relation to current events. I think the easiest thing to say is, one of my campaign slogans is common sense for the common people, right? Or common sense for the common man, whatever you want to say. But I think it really is just common sense. Like, why do we have to regulate? Why do we have to, pass these things that are just going to infringe on our rights and take them away more and get us further away from the Constitution? And it really comes down to power. It's all about power. It's all about their ability to control the narrative. It's all about their ability to control what we do, and if you look at any great civilization in the past, God, the last 100 years where guns were really relevant. If you look at any civilization, if you look at Germany, if you look at the Czech Republic, if you look at China, if you look even at Russia for the most part in different periods, they went in and they took all the guns. When you take all of the guns, the people have no way of fighting back, which thus makes them servants, if that makes any sense, in their own country, right? Because you can't do anything. You're kind of totally dependent upon the government helping you and doing things for you. And even further, we're turning into a welfare state. If you look at, all the stimulus money going out, I mean, there are people out there that have had jobs. I can tell you, I know a ton. They've had jobs all along and are getting $8,000, $9,000 for the economic stimulus package. And it's like, well, what did you do for the 9, 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, whatever, thousands of dollars that you didn't do? And, I will say that everything that I've gotten from the government, I've literally either ripped the check up or I've put return to sender. I won't take the money because I don't want the money, because someone's got to pay for it. And that person's me, that person's you. I think that with this most recent bill, there's like $14,000 plus that it's going to put everybody in debt, and that adds to the national debt. Like, that's just crazy to think that a kid that's not even born yet is going to have a $14,000 bill in her head before they even come out. So it's crazy. And, in these bills, it's never simple. There's always hundreds and thousands of pages of just nonsense where, if you look at, Cincinnati, for example, they got like Hamilton County got like $150 million. City of Cincinnati got, I think it was like $95 million. And it's like, they still have money from the last economic package. Like, they haven't given it out, and it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to be giving all this money out. But again, it's all about control. It's about this welfare state. If we give you this, again, we're trying to control you. So I think the big piece is, in kind of summarizing all of this, we have people in office that have an ulterior motive. We have people in office that basically just want power. They don't care about us. They don't care about America. They don't care about our values. They don't care about the moral fabric of America. They don't care about our history. They don't care about our future. They care about their future. They care about their legacy. They care about their bank accounts. And quite frankly, I'm tired of it. That is why I'm talking to you tonight. I am tired of it, and I want to change all of that. If I get the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., I'm not going with an agenda. I'm not going with an agenda to the fact that, I'm going to make this a career. I'm not going, with corporate fat cats lining my pockets with money. I'm not going, to attend fancy parties. I'm not going to do anything but the job that I was hired to do, or in this case, elected to do. And that is work for the state of Kentucky, work for my constituents, and then work for America. I'm not a politician. I'm the furthest thing from a politician, and I think if we look back at Donald Trump, we see that was one of his big keys to success. He wasn't a politician, and they couldn't stand that. And that's why they spent 4 years trying to get him out, because they didn't like the fact that he wasn't part of them and he wasn't part of the inner circle. And I'm not part of that circle either. I don't ever want to be part of that circle. I think at the end of the day, I'd go kind of do my job and come home, and kind of go back to my normal life. I don't plan on writing books or, going on speaking tours or engagements or whatever else after I get done. I'll go back to the life that I had prior. And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, if you look at a lot of the Roman soldiers that were generals or people that kind of fought, they had a job, maybe tending fields, whatever else, the stuff that they did. They went off to war and they came home like nothing ever happened. And they kind of just went back to what they were doing. And I think the same thing for me, as I look at the broader end of the spectrum, I don't have an agenda to go and to really try to get a net worth per se, right? If you look at most of these people that are now, you'll see that, if they started off with $100 in the bank, when they left, they've got $1 million in the bank. How do you become so wealthy? Because, they do speaking engagements, they do all these extra things to start earning extra money. And at the end of the day, it's one of those things where, it's crazy. So what I'd like to do is challenge everybody to start thinking about that. Start thinking about how this stuff impacts you, how this impacts us, and just a simple litmus test. What does the actual bill solve for? Does it actually solve for what they're saying it's going to. What is that cost going to be? How is that going to be paid for? Who's going to pay for it? And how long is that going to be paid for? How long is that going to be in place? I want to have legislation that's a la carte. There's no riders. Here's 100 pages of layman terms, and here's the bill. And then I want everybody in the state of Kentucky, in every state, for to be a matter of fact, to be able to read it and to make a determination. And I want you to call me. I want you to call me and say, hey, David, don't vote for this, or vote for this, or we need to change this. Why? Because that's what we are. We're elected officials to represent you. And if you don't give us feedback and we're just kind of going off of what we feel or think, then by all measures, that's not really representing you. And I think too, one of the big pieces is I'm not going up to DC with an affiliation for being a Democrat or Republican. I don't care about Democrats or Republicans as a party, right? The Democrats and Republicans as parties, they're broken. And I don't care what anybody says. The Republicans we're going to get fixed and we're going to get no, they're not, and even if they do, it still doesn't matter because the Republican Party is to the point where, if you look at the state level, in a lot of these different places, especially in Kentucky, they already have people picked for the next election. They already have people picked who they want to be in office. And at the end of the day, they're picking people that, haven't really experienced poverty, haven't experienced being hungry, haven't experienced having their gas and electric shut off because they couldn't afford to pay it, flushing a toilet hoping that it flushes because you forgot to pay your water bill, or you don't have the money to pay your water bill. People that have been homeless, people that have really went and ministered to the sick, or people that have really went and ministered to, the people that are hungry, and just kind of talk to them. And they don't have that, and I just think it's definitely a vital component, a vital characteristic that we really need. We need people that really understand what it's like to be in these things, in these situations. And if we can't relate, then how do we expect to regulate? How do we expect to pass bills and to, put legislation that actually has consequence, that actually means something, is going to do something? And I think that's a big part of where I'm at, right? I really want to just go and make a difference. I can sit here all night and talk about my agenda. I can talk about education. I could talk about crime. I could talk about guns, which we kind of talked a little bit about here. I could talk about, abortion. I could talk about murder. I could talk about my stance on capital punishment, but who cares, right? I think at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is what's right for the American people. When you look at education, I could sit here for 45 minutes and spew off facts, but at the end of the day, what's best for the districts, what's best for the state, what's best for the teachers, what's best for the kids, what's best for the parents. It's definitely a two-part equation. The parents have to be an integral part of that conversation, but the teachers need to have the power and decision-making authority to kind of go in and do the things they need to do, whereas now they can't do that, right? There's no money in the schools. All this money is going to all these foreign countries for aid and studies and endless wars, and it really just needs to be put back into our kids. If you look at the economy, our economy is just, in the state of Kentucky, we're 41st economy out of 50 states. And where are the Republicans and the Democrats at? What have they done to help the economy grow? If you go down to Appalachia, or if you even go to like the western part of Kentucky and down in the mountains, there's just so much missed opportunity there. There are so many people that, at one point there were some bigger companies there and things like that have kind of just disappeared over time. But no one's doing anything to reinvigorate those communities. No one's doing anything to drive new business there, which, in most of these communities, you work either at a gas station or you work at a fast food restaurant. If you're lucky, maybe at a grocery store, but that's not a living wage. Even if you catch a Walmart, whatever else, maybe like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, but, there's no real industry there. And, but no one's really focusing on putting that back in there. If you look at education, we're 38 out of 50 states. What are the Republicans and the Democrats done in the state of Kentucky to better that education system? And it's nothing. We have a governor that just wants to keep pushing and pushing and pushing these people and these kids further away from education. Learning at home in this NTI environment is not working. Does it work for some people? Yes, but some people have to have that in-person experience. And Kentucky needs options. In the state of Ohio, they have K through 12, which is a virtual option with, well-qualified teachers, and it's the same thing as being in person, but Kentucky doesn't have that. So I would like to see, on the flip side of this pandemic, us have that third option, private, public, and have that third option. I would also like to see the teachers in the districts, have opportunity to kind of take back that piece from the state and the federal government. Let them make decisions that impact the school district. Let them figure out how to spend the money. Let them make requests and then fulfill their request. We need trades. In most of these schools, they get $300 to $400 a year for each kid for a trade. If you're trying to weld or if you're trying to do any kind of carpentry or anything else these days, have you seen the prices of wood? You can't buy anything. $300, it's nothing. We need to invest our money into our education because, when we look about the big picture, right? We talk about the United States of America being kind of this global beacon of freedom. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're not going to be relevant anymore. The U.S. dollar has been the kind of the standard for I think like the last 100 years. 8 years, it ain't going to be that way anymore because a lot of people are turning away from it. There's nothing to back it up with. In 8 to 10 years, China is going to overtake us as the largest economy. And once we lose that, we may not ever be able to get it back. And then what does that do for jobs? Where does that kind of put us in a position to be successful? And at the end of the day, it doesn't make us successful. We're on a downward spiral. We need to start now and start working on these items and start working on getting these things fixed. And I think the easiest and best way to do that is have someone that represents us with some good ideas and that's open to ideas and principles and that will go and just do the right thing. And, I can sit here and make campaign promises all day and all night, but I think if you meet me or you come talk to me, you'll understand I'm authentic. I'm real. I'm going to tell you how I feel. I'm going to tell you what I believe. And again, you have an opportunity to kind of change my mind. There are certain things I won't bend on, but I think the big part of it is just having someone authentic, a person of we the people that will go up to Washington D.C. and just vote their conscience. Someone that's not going to vote party line. Someone that's not going to, oh well, we've got to do this because it's the Democratic way, or oh, we've got to do this because it's the Republican way, or I can't do that because the Democrats came up with the idea, even though it's good. That's just Democrats. We can't do that. We're Republican. We've got to fight it. Or, as a Democrat, all the Republicans came up with, it's a great idea, but can't do that because it's Republicans. Well, who cares? Is it benefiting America? Does it make sense? Can it pass a simple litmus test? Is it going to actually fix a problem versus band-aiding it up for the next person to come along or for your next campaign to kind of come along and, you're placating the world with, oh, I've done this, and, I've pulled this out of my playbook and you know what? I'm playing your heartstrings. So, Kentucky, wake up. America, wake up. It's time to really wake up. It's time to start and rebuild this great republic. It's time to really just kind of reinvigorate this economy. It's time to reinvigorate ideas and freedoms. It's time to reinvigorate our children. And all at the same point, not forgetting where we came from, because forgetting where we came from will obviously just set us up for failure, right? Where if you forget where you came from, you're going to repeat the sins of your past, and we don't want to do that. America, has had a checkered history in some respects, right? We've done a lot of dumb stuff, but I think in 2021, we've also made a lot of strides in the right direction. Are we perfect? No. Do we have a lot of opportunity and growth? Do we have a lot of opportunity for inclusion? Do we have a lot of opportunity for equality? By all measures. But in the current trajectory that we're going, we're never going to achieve it because it doesn't make sense from a narrative standpoint. Because if you placate and you just put a band-aid on certain situations and the situation remains, that guarantees you a spot in office. If you don't fix it, but you kind of do, but you kind of don't, you kind of just glaze on the top, guarantees you a spot for re-election. At the end of the day, if you attack at the core of the cold, if you attack at the core of the problem, the symptoms will dissipate. And that's really what I'm all about. I will take whatever legislation is in front of me and I'll look at it and, I'll kind of break it down simply. What is the benefit? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to benefit? And does it solve for something? And if it does, hey, you got my vote. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But I'll also make it public. Hey, let's really talk about this. Let's go through this and really look at what this really does. And I'll bring that attention to that, so the American people can see that, especially the people in Kentucky. So, I really just kind of want to highlight finally, just talking about the amendments. Second and First Amendment are near and dear to my heart. They're under attack. We as Americans, we as Kentuckians, absolutely positively have to protect those rights because the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, and most importantly, the right to bear arms are under attack, and we cannot lose those. The punishment for all is not a good solution, and it will never be a good solution. And unfortunately, I think that's the way we're going. So let's hope and pray that it doesn't go there. And let's really work on putting good Americans in office. Let's start with David Berry, 2022, United States Senate. God bless you. God bless Kentucky. God bless America. Have a great evening. We'll talk again soon.